Hey, guys, this episode is brought to you by TeePublic. You guys know TeePublic. I've been with TeePublic forever, since the Schmodown days, since the big thing launched. If you have a Sith Council shirt, if you have any of our shirts, you got them from TeePublic. From over the years, we've been working with TeePublic. When I went out on my own, they were one of the first calls that I made. So not only can you get all of the branded merch from this show, t-shirts, stickers, phone cases, mugs, all that, when you are on the site, do a search. You're going to discover something that you like, especially in this space, man. An artist uploads new work to the TeePublic marketplace every 5 seconds. Because of the thousands of global artists that populate the marketplace, you're going to find designs you won't find at a big box store, especially if your interests are super niche. Doesn't matter what you're into, you can find it on TeePublic. You want a graphic tee of a cat riding a unicorn? Check. A t-shirt with your favorite movie quote? Got it. You want merch for the big thing? Hey, that's what you want, obviously. I've been using TeePublic forever. If you guys know me from back in the day, I've been talking about them that long. So it was obvious that I was going to be using them again, and I'm so glad that I did. So many of you guys, when I see you at some of the events, you're wearing the big thing shirts, and it all comes from TeePublic. And browse around on my link. It's going to be in the iCard right there. It's going to be in the description right there. Browse around. You will find stuff that you like. So I'm happy that they're on the show. They're sponsoring the show now. TeePublic, everybody. Check them out. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the big thing. It is UAP Tuesday. That's right. We talk about everything going on in the world of the UFO, UAP phenomenon. Yes, there was that second, last week was kind of crazy. There was that second documentary, interview rather, with David Grush, UFO whistleblower, and that went on for a bit. There's a lot of information that came out, a lot of the same stuff. Reilly and I talked about it a bit last week, but then after that, a whole lot of stuff happened. Then the Mexican hearings came out, and I mean, if you had the footage that they showed of the UFOs in general, and Graves was there, and Avi Loeb, and everybody that was there, and I feel like it would have been a story that more people would have been like, okay, what's going on now? The skeptics in the room have more to put their finger and go, see, because of what happened at that hearing. Now, I know some people still think that the little ET alien bodies were still, maybe they were real. I don't know what they were. We just know that there's a lot of evidence that has come out that the guy who put them up was a notorious showman, that he smuggled them out of Peru somehow and all that. And we're getting into all that today, too. So, yes, we'll talk about that. There's two other major things that happened this week. The NASA, there was this, they finally came out, talked about what it was. And I think it's actually a much bigger story than people are talking about, because the thing that they did say inside of it, and this is to me why I think a lot of skeptics are going to be like, well, wait a minute. Because NASA is always, well, what's NASA say? What does NASA say? That's always been the thing. What does NASA say? Well, NASA said, we have no evidence that it's aliens, but we're not telling you it's not. So we'll get into all that as well. And then finally, Tim Burchett came out and said, they're not giving us that committee. They're not going to give us that committee. But we are getting a second hearing. That shocked me. I didn't think that was going to happen. So if we get a second hearing, what the hell happens there? Who's going to talk? Some of the people that were supposed to talk the first time that didn't? Interesting. We'll talk about that and more on today's show. So if you're brand new to the channel, you've never been here before, I'm just asking you to show a little class. Hit that button. That's right. Trying to get to 100. We're at 93,000. And we can get to 100,000, but we need you guys. We have so many people coming in here. I'm excited, man. We've got a lot of good conversation coming up, and I can't wait for you guys to be part of it. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are found. All right, it's the big thing. Let's get to it. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. UAP Tuesday. It is exciting times. And I'll tell you why. Not only do all the stories I prepped up top, and not only because I have my buddy, Mark Yodius Reilly here, as always.
I had the perfect recipe for cake, Kristian.
We'll talk about that. Don't you worry. I mentioned this a little while ago, and you guys have mentioned this in the comments, that Reilly and I are very much, we want to believe, right? We always talk about things where it's like, okay, we don't know necessarily. We want to know the questions. We have our ideas of what we think it is, but our biggest thing is, what are the questions? But you guys are always saying, well, you got to have somebody there that can ask the other questions of what if it isn't what you guys think it is? What if it, the skeptic side of you and a positive skeptic side of you. And I've mentioned many times, if you've seen last Thursday, I kind of went in on Brett a little bit, and he and I have since shook hands. But I've mentioned my buddy DJ Wooldridge before. He's been on the show, not on this capacity, but I asked him because DJ, to his credit, he had said a couple things where I was like, yeah, but you don't. I bring up a certain situation and you don't know what I'm talking about. Well, DJ went and did the work. He watched 5 parts of the UFO investigating the unknown. Still doesn't believe a lick of it, but I'm so happy to have him, and that is DJ Wooldridge. What's up, DJ?
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And just to be clear, I like to perceive myself as agnostic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm agnostic. You know what I mean?
So you're not like full on like this isn't real.
I think the way I like to view it, because as far as I know from the because I like looking into stuff from the scientific community in general, not just on this stuff,
Sure.
just in general.
Sure.
And there's not the data doesn't prove out to me, but I like tiers of stuff. Like, okay, are there other sentient life in the universe? Universe is a big place. I personally believe, yeah, probably. You know what I mean? That makes sense to me. Are they coming here? It could be. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I believe that. Could be. Do we have them? Does the government have them in the basement? I guess possibly. That's more improbable to me.
Yeah.
So, but that's all fair in your presentation. That
Sounds
you're
right.
But,
It just sounds like a wonderful conversation about to ensue.
That's my point. My point is, listen, could this stuff? Sure. Do I believe it? No. The hard fact of, like, if I said to DJ, guess what? They've got him. Yeah. I know it. And he's like, well, show me. And I go, well, I can't. Mm-hmm. I can't. But I'm not Grush where I know people who have it. Right. I just maybe. And the way that I'm going to present it is the same way as far as, that's what I was trying to say to Brett, but definitely emotions got the best of me. I am just saying that I just think that, as where you say, there's not enough evidence out there to convince you that hard fact it is. I just think there's so much cover-up and potential cover-up and so many fingers that point in a particular direction and going, wait a minute, what is that? And we keep getting the same answers from all the military leaders, the same way of, well, we're not really going to tell you, and it's nothing. We'll prove it. Because let me ask you this, DJ, in the military side of it. If the military, the government, because people always say the government, right? The government is covering this up, and what the government is saying is that it's not the government covering up. And what they said, did you happen to watch the new David Grush thing? Mm-mm. So inside of that, there's a particular thing that I found fascinating. And this is an official document. This isn't like the one. There is a document where they inside of that same documentary where, like, this supposedly came from Kennedy asking for UFO footage that wasn't confirmed. This document was confirmed. There was a military leader who said, right after all the Roswell stuff was going down, right? Yeah. And what this leader said was, it will be too expensive for the government to search this stuff out. This funding cannot come from the government. It has to come from outside sources. It cannot be an official government program. It must be run from the outside. It must be essentially hidden, whatever the words were. Yeah. And if you believe all the stuff that Grush says, all the stuff that Stephen Greer, or all the stuff that various people have said throughout the years, is that's exactly what has been going on with these. Yeah. Do you think that there's a cover-up, not necessarily of aliens, but do you think there's a cover-up of what this stuff is?
I don't know. I think for me, it's one of those things too. It depends on, like, I think to successfully cover up something, you're fundamentally talking about lying. And the things that makes lies difficult are scale and the amount of people involved, right? So, like, if I'm in high school and I put a ding on the fender of my parents' car, and it's just me and I'm the only one that knows about it, I might be able to get away with that shit. Mm-hmm. But if I drive it off a cliff in front of my entire class, my parents are finding out about that, right? And so I think when you're talking about, obviously the government covers things up. I don't know that, especially now, that I think they're particularly good at it. Like, if
you're talking about the government,
but again, once you talk about scale, so if you're talking about what was it? Didn't Grush say something like Lockheed knows about it or something along those lines? Once you start getting independent contractors, it's like, well, then this would be public knowledge. Like, it wouldn't be up to debate. You wouldn't be able to maintain a cover up of that of that size because that you couldn't maintain a secret this huge because this is something that would redefine physics, biology, history, all of those things with that amount of people. It just, in my mind, it would be impossible. And if you look at stuff, and I know you're saying it's not government, but if you look at like covert CIA operations in the height of the Cold War. Do you curse on this show?
You can do, yeah. If you
when you hear the way they bumble through it,
right?
And it's like I just don't believe in people's capability, especially once you run up against, and this is true of whether it's government or business bureaucracy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like that, it's just there's no way it just doesn't all spill out if something of this scale.
Yeah, see, I mean, using his car analogy of
it's great.
The difference though is if your classmates told people that your car drove off, people wouldn't look at them like they're crazy. They believe it.
Yeah, I was. That was my point because at a certain point with the Tic Tac video, my own experience, which I've said many times on the show, and just the cliff notes, I saw something, DJ, in the sky that was very similar to many people's reports. But anyways, the skepticism, I saw it on the news when they're reporting on Channel 7, and I sent you that huge long text because I was angry for some reason. They can hide behind that, I feel like, to your point. I feel like that crazy shit can be presented to a small group of people in like the CIA.
But
then they're like, maybe they don't believe it, but it doesn't get past there. And then what does get past there is like, it's just lights in the sky, and it just becomes legend. Just like I saw Bigfoot.
Do you feel like though you would feel as isolated in that if you were working on that same project with 100 other guys?
No, yeah, you're right. I wouldn't feel isolated.
And I also think about, and I'm obviously not as up on the canon of all this stuff. So whatever. But like, I think when we talk about this stuff, the questions I have, right, is, okay, so if something crashed, where did it crash? Who's responding to that first? It's probably local responders, police, news, stuff like that. None of those people told anybody. They immediately call who? The feds, the Army, Air Force. Like, who do they call? Well, let's say they call the feds, right? There's no jurisdictional pissing match between the different branches of government of whose responsibility this is, like there would be on other things. Let's say there's not that. So they decide, let's decide this is happening around the time where the Air Force is a thing. They decide it's the Air Force's thing. So Air Force is like, we can't handle it. But now at this point, how many layers deep of people knowing, and nobody's like, we should tell somebody. Like we should. Yeah,
But isn't that what David Grush is? Isn't that essentially who he is, though?
But
he is that guy.
So maybe you guys know. So for me, how is it that Edward Snowden revealed that basically the U.S. is spying on its own citizens, and he had to flee the country? And David Grush is on podcasts, and again, scale wise, this is like 10 times.
Agreed.
So like, how is he? And because I know we talked about this on my show with Roxy, and she was like, "Well, he's got whistleblower status." It's like, well, how does he qualify for that? And because Edward Snowden, they're like, no, he doesn't. We will hunt him till the ends of the earth. Grush, go in, do your testimony.
Well, but Snowden wasn't part. He wasn't a high intelligent officer, was he? Like he wasn't. He was just a guy who. This guy was Grush was a high level intelligent officer.
Yeah,
he was part of. He was in the actual program itself, and also from what he was saying, he was a full on, not to your level of skeptic, but he was a skeptic. He didn't believe. He's like, okay, he thought when they put him in on this thing, he thought it was a joke. He's like, okay, I guess whatever I did to piss people off or whatever it was, I'm now in a singing the more and more, and this is very similar to what I always people yell at me every week when I say it's Heineck, not Heinrich. Heineck. I always say Heinrich.
Project Blue Book.
Yeah, thank you. And I always say Heinrich, and people get pissed at me. Heineck, it's the same type of thing, because Heineck was very similar. Where
I thought it was Heinrich too, so I'll take it with you.
Yeah, but no, they're more mad at you the way you say nuclear. But
nuclear.
Yeah, they hate it.
Nuclear.
But Heineck, so anyway, but it's the same thing. Heineck went in the same way of going, okay, he was hired to essentially say, no, these are balloons, they're this and this, but after all the investigation, this is in the thing that you saw as well too. The investigation, after a while, he was like, a lot of these can be explained but there's a fair amount that cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we're not saying, again, there's two different things when we're talking about alien crashes and things, but there's, even NASA now is saying, we'll get into it. Even NASA is saying there's a good amount that we don't know what it is. There's stuff that we can explain, and there's stuff that we cannot explain.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff to me that is the most fascinating, that I think we can dive into a little bit. But as far as Grush, he was there, and then he started hearing all these different things. So when he decided to do the whistleblower status, it was after all those reports that came from the guy that was hired by the one that was with Clinton. And
Harry Reid.
thank you, Harry Reid. When he was hired by Harry Reid, like, so to answer your earlier point of how come people aren't talking, there are a ton of people talking. The question is, who's going to not go, I don't believe it. How come there's not more people talking? Because there's a lot of people talking.
Yeah. Well, you go to the Harry Reid thing. You guys talked about Robert Bigelow on the show at all?
No.
Okay, so Robert Bigelow is a wealthy real estate guy that's way into this stuff. And I don't feel like it's strong. It's too strong to say he coerced Harry Reid.
Yeah.
But he was a big donor to Harry Reid, from what I understand, and convinced him, hey, you know what would be a good idea? Do this UFO program. And wouldn't you know it, who was contracted to do this program but Robert Bigelow? He's a character. He also wanted to do a space hotel, a floating space hotel.
He's the
in
one that
2022.
James Fox spoke to, yeah.
He's also like a huge donor to Ron DeSantis now. But and so it's like, and that was one of the things when I got a lot of heat after watching the first Nat Geo show episode of Nat Geo show. I was like, I don't know, and that was part of it. That it's like, okay, if you're talking about the program, why are you skipping over the Robert Bigelow involvement? Other than the fact that when you phrase it that way, it sounds like normal government graft. Like, hey, I have a buddy that's giving me a lot of money, so yeah, I guess we'll create a program to pay your program to, pay your company to be a contractor, be a part of it.
But wait, DJ, but that point though, Harry Reid was like a very, very like respected force in government, right? So like, if it has that stigma of UFO where it's one thing to be like government that is paid off to do certain things, to take donations, whether it's NRA or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
But if Harry Reid didn't believe in the side that there's more UFO stuff going on,
yeah,
he couldn't say to the guy, "Can you pick something else?"
I mean, I'm sure that he does to believe it. I'm not saying that anybody in these hearings aren't necessarily lying. I just know a lot of, when you're talking about Congress and you're talking about the Senate, a lot of those people also believe life begins at conception, and just because they believe it doesn't mean that it's necessarily scientifically sound.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not here to say like this person's lying or this person's whatever. I have no reason to not believe that Grush believes everything he's saying. You know what I mean? I just don't know that like he's providing enough evidence, or there's enough evidence to back up the claims that he's making. Especially when one of those claims, if I understand correctly, one of those claims is that the government's like hurting people to keep them from saying this. And it's like, how are you here then?
Well, that's what he said though. No, he said they asked him does he know in particular situations of threats and have anyone been put in harm's way. What he was saying in particular was, for him, there were threats were made. To answer your question, how is he still there? He's been protected at some cost because he is getting threats, continue to get threats. Yeah. But he said that he knows of other people who have gotten threats. But you look at Ryan Graves, who was one of the pilots that was there in favor. They said they have not gotten threats too. So, but there are other people, and it's because you believe in the shady government theory, which a lot of us do too, right? There's also a lot of reports of people who were out and reporting and getting closer and closer, and even the Harvard professor that was really involved in that in the Zimbabwe case, and then was mysteriously killed, and like 3 other people with his name were killed on the same day, but by car accidents. And it's like, coincidence? Maybe. Shady? Maybe. Yeah. But Reilly, you were about to say something.
I mean, I don't know where to jump in with some of your points, DJ. When it comes to like skepticism, it's like I'm sitting here listening to you going, "Yep, I'm with him now." Yeah, I'm just like, but that when it comes to like crashed UFOs and having possession of a for this story, I guess, aliens, right? Alien remains and whatnot, and that's one rabbit hole. I feel like. Then there's the rabbit hole of whatever that is over Chicago O'Hare when it punches a hole in the cloud.
Yeah, I feel like us having the U.S. government having access to alien technology, that is what I'm most skeptical about.
That's me too, because then, and we'll get there, when, the Mexican hearings happen and they bring out the aliens, I mean, I immediately went, give me a break.
It's a step back.
No.
It's a step back.
Yeah, it was a step back. So that aside real quick. But when it comes to like, like pilots seeing something, and then the government saying, you know, no, you didn't. You know that there's a large amount of pilots out there that just don't like the stigma of saying I saw something.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I'm more in their camp.
Yeah.
You know, having seen something. And how many of these, if we're talking crashed alien crafts, when you think about them not being able to identify these things, these UAPs, because they're so fast, because they're so quick, because they do this, because they disappear, it's like, what are the odds of them actually crashing versus them finding it? Because then all the red tape that you're bringing up, like the local authorities to the feds to this getting involved, I'm like, yeah, it would be really hard to keep that together. But when it's... So I take that out of the equation and be just like, we just have so much evidence in the skies.
Yeah.
And NASA comes out and says, we basically just need more investigating. That's kind of where I am, because I'm less believing in the crash stuff now. But when Grush says it, I am more leaning there because of everything I'm seeing.
See, I'm still in the same spot that I was last week as I am today, because I think that I do, like, when you look at...
But I also believe there's government hiding stuff.
And there's two different conversations, right? We'll finish up on this part of the conversation too, and then get into actually what the hell do we think it is. Yeah. The first part is I do believe in that there were crash things. I mean, I absolutely do. As far as and this is not a shot at you by any means. There's a lot of people have been like, well, if they're that advanced, how are they going to crash? How the hell do you know how it works? How do you know if lightning hits it? How do you know if it's weather? We don't know. It could be anything. Well, if it's that far advanced. And as far as the other thing that you were saying earlier, I don't, in my head, what I believe, right? And again, I am in the same way you're saying, if you believe in it, great. For me, I don't believe that it's light year travel from other space. I just don't. What do you think it is? For me, for physics and the way that everything that Grush has been saying, everything those two, I think it is more likely, if it is anything. What do I think it is? I don't know. But what do I think it's more likely? As far as if you look at physics in the way that because of what they're trying to do, bending space and time in dimensional theory, whether you believe in how you can bend space and time and all that, that to me is physically, if someone has the technology to be able to do that, is more likely than thousands of light years away. You know?
Absolutely.
Than visitors from Mars.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I understand that. I do think I have the similar issue in that, like, we have as far as I understand it, we have no evidence of other dimensions at this point.
Absolutely not.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're still in the same boat of, which again is not to say, just like, I know people that are way into ghosts. I have friends that are big into Bigfoot and all that stuff. And so, I grew up, like, I have the shirt on, like, I love cryptids and UFOs and all that stuff. But it's the same. You're there. That's that leap of, like, but based on the things we know, like, we have no evidence that this is possible, which is not to say, like, you could have somebody that was like, Hogwarts wizards are real. Like, well, I mean, sure, but we don't have anything to.
Well, that's different, though. But because let's say eventually we find out what the hell these things are flying out there, and that essentially, like, because you do believe there are things in the sky that we see that people are seeing.
Yeah, I don't know that they.
You don't know what they are, but you believe there are things in the sky. Let's say hypothetically they are. We found out there are these things that they're not other governments. Yeah, we don't know what they are. Yeah. But there's something else flying around out there, and like NASA says, we're not saying that they are extraterrestrial. We're not saying that they're not. Yeah. Because that to me is more likely, if it's something, if they do prove whatever the hell it might be, there's something out there that could potentially be evidence. I'm just saying potentially. You could say that that's potential evidence. There is no potential evidence of Bigfoot. There's no potential evidence of Hogwarts.
I mean, the Hogwarts one definitely. Right. But when you go to, like, Bigfoot and ghost people, it depends on who you talk to. You know what I mean? It depends on who you talk to, especially with the ghost stuff, or even if you want to take it to that scale, something like God. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those, like, I'm not in a position to especially when you talk about, like, having experience, like, I can't dictate to you what your experience was.
What you saw and what you did.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not, like, I grew up in a Christian community, and all that stuff, and I can't like litigate people's personal experiences and stuff like that. Sure. And I think that is, I feel like UFOs in particular, and I guess it depends depending on who you talk to, but let's say UFOs in particular fall in this interesting position where I feel like the community that invests in that find it more believable because it falls under the umbrella of science. But simultaneously, that is why people like me find it more challenging, because it's like, but this is now in a field that it is things we know about.
Right.
You know what I mean? Things we can study, things we can measure, things we can stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it is this catch-22 that I think makes it more compelling for some people and also more challenging to verify for others.
I think that's a very fair point for sure. And I think that's also why we've said it many times on this show, like every week we say it. And it's a question I want to ask you in a second, DJ, but it's like what it's actually going to take for people to say, okay, well, maybe that is more than what I actually see, right? Maybe it is. And I also want to know from DJ in a second, like what he thinks those things are, because he's, like, as he says, everyone thinks it's something.
Yeah.
We just don't know what the hell it is. It's a different, as we segue away from the conversation of whether or not crash ships and all those other things, what we're going to hear.
Yeah.
But I do want to tell you guys what I'm very excited about here. This week we have a great sponsor in Fume. I'm going to tell you about them right now. All right, guys. This episode is sponsored by Fume. Bad habits, man. A lot of people have bad habits, and bad habits can really kick your ass, and they can mess with your health. They really can set you back. I've seen it, been around it, and I know. And when you see this, the first thing you go, well, what is that? The first thing you should know is that's not a vape pen. It's not electronic. It's natural. That's why I'm on board in the first place. What is it then? It's a device. And it helps you quit nasty habits. And that's why I was on board right away when they reached out. At first, I'm not going to lie, I was skeptical. I didn't know. I was like, I don't know. That's not really my thing. I said, wait a minute. You're not breathing in nasty chemicals with this. And what it is, it's it's just fresh air. It's natural air. It is flavored air. That's it. You heard me. Air. And it flavors it. It is a great way to replace nasty habits. There is no nasty chemicals, none of the stuff that creates bad habits. And that to me was like, wait a minute. So you can actually turn a bad habit and you just make it a good habit because it ain't messing you up and it ain't hurting you. Because I said, wait a minute, flavored air? And I said, it just feels fresh. They sent me one of them. And I said, okay, great, cool. It's pretty well weighted, it's perfectly balanced, and it's very easy to fidget with. Stopping is something that everybody puts off because it is hard. But if you switch to Fume, it is easy, and it's enjoyable, and it's fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has had thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use that code BIGTHING. You can get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfume.com. Use that code BIGTHING to save an additional 10% off your order today. All right, thank you again to our new friends over at Fume. Check it out. Link is in the description. Kick those bad habits with a good habit, man. All right, so as we were talking about before we went to that little break, DJ, you'd said, I asked you, everyone here thinks there's something out there. We don't know what the hell's in the sky. Mm-hmm. What do you personally think that those things are?
I think it's different things depending on the situation. I think it's a lot. I think typically what you're dealing with is, I think I heard it phrased that normal things seen in abnormal circumstances. So I think one of the videos, I think it's called Go Fast. I heard different things called Go Fast. Again, I'm not as up to date on the canon, but that was part of the NASA stuff that we were talking about. And when you look at the video, it's like, wow, that thing looks like it's booking. And then when you do the measurement, it's like, oh, it's going at the same speed as the wind. Right. And I think it's stuff like that, especially when you're skeptical like me, a lot of times it's like, see that grainy thing on a video? That's an advanced alien craft. And it's like, but how did we come to that conclusion? Because you know what I mean? Like, do you have it parked somewhere that we can look at it? Like, because it could be as somebody that works with video and works with editing. It's like, that could be, again, going to the
Stephen Greer says yes.
Like it could be like like going back to the ghost thing. My wife watches these ghost shows, and it's like, look at this spectral entity. It's like, well, that's a double negative. I can tell you what that is. That's not a ghost. And so I think it depends. So when you go back to that Nat Geo show, there was a thing. I can bring it up in my notes, but anyway, there was things people saw. And the way the show presented it was like, they said it was swamp gas, and everybody was really mad about it. And it's like, yeah, but swamp gas is a real weird thing. It's a real phenomenon. It's been around for a while. It's how we get the legend of the Will o' the Wisp. Like, it's a thing, and it's weird. And so if you're not used to that, it's weird, and you might think it's something else. Like, I've had, I'm sure a lot of people have had seen weird things, had weird experiences. We talk about the pilots that have seen stuff, and I also wonder, because we don't have data for this, how many pilots saw weird stuff and was like, that was weird, and then they moved on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you see weird things. The other day, my wife and I were driving out, and there was this no clouds in the sky except this weird cloud spiral. And it's like, what is that? And of course, my brain jumps to like, maybe it was somebody learning how to skywrite, or maybe it was a plane crash. We don't know, but it was I only bring that up to say it was weird, and I don't have an explanation for it. And so I think it's different stuff, and I think especially when you get back to, I think the first official like UFO sighting was what, 1945 or something.
I guess the first official. I mean, they had those farmers. I think it was the 30s, right? The 40s was Roswell. There's one that they picture that the two farmers took.
Yeah.
Outside that, I think that was the late 30s, maybe early 40s.
But the point there is, I don't think commercial flight. I think the first year commercial flight overtook train travel was 1955. So that's very early in air flights with people that don't necessarily have a lot of experience with seeing stuff in the sky. And then you get that, and then we have our canonized UFO lexicon. And then people grew up with that. And then, so when you see something you don't understand it, you kind of fill that non-understanding with this information that's kind of become part of the pop culture understanding. And so you could see a variety of weird things and just interpret it different ways.
But what about like I guess the point is fair when it comes to people not knowing what these things are flying around in the sky at all, because it has in the 40s of, well, what is that? I don't know what a plane looks like. How do I know what that is?
The butane tank.
Yeah, but we did have things as far as like enough to where there were enough military people came out down the line, right? Like from the 40s up until last week.
Yeah.
Whether it's pilots like Graves and Graver saying that Fravor, excuse me, what like there are things close that they saw close enough, and that speed thing I read that you're talking about with NASA, that is accurate. But there's also other pilots that were right there that said the things zipped by really fast. And if you're why the pilot's going to lie, and that gets to my other point. There are so many, and to your earlier point of how more people aren't talking. If you go back and you look at not just that documentary, but you do all the stuff, whether it's stuff that James Fox talked to, or just the hearing that they had in like 2003, not the official hearing, but the one where they brought everybody around, I think 2006 actually. Yeah. The amount of military and like actual people who are not just farmers drinking moonshine. Like these are like what does it have like to say that they actually saw something up close, whether it was alien craft or stuff in the actual sky itself. Besides monetarily, I'm not going to tell you there are not some snake oil salesmen out there doing stuff. There are, but not all of them. You think that every single person who said this, they saw it clear as day. They've seen these things clear as day. I know of people in the military that have seen things, and as you said, don't you think there's a few of them? I know of someone in the military that same type of thing. There were quite a few of them that saw something clear as day in the sky, not a blip, clear as day.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of them, and to answer your question, well, why aren't they talking? Because they were scared to hell of losing rank, losing this, looking like they're lunatics, telling them to be shut up, followed, all of that.
Yeah.
So that's out there too. So what does the military, these types of military people have to gain besides that? Well, they can write a book.
I don't know if anything. I have no reason to believe any of them are lying.
Yeah.
I have every reason to believe that they believe that they saw what they saw. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
so
again,
you're just saying it's hard. I understand where you're coming from.
Explained away.
Because it's like there are ways to say. Well, I guess that's a better question. James Fox, when he was on, I forget what show it was, had a conversation, and again, to be to your credit, having an intelligent conversation about this in the same way this other guy was, and James Fox did the same thing I did with Brett up top. Yeah. He was at first because you're used to doing this, and then when somebody comes at a point of view, the guy said, "No, I'm actually a fan of your work. I just have a lot of questions about it too." And James was like, "All right." He backed off, and they had a conversation about it. And James said something along the lines. I'm going to mess the numbers up, but he said something along the lines of, "Look, yes, when you look at the numbers of something, I think it's like 87% of the stuff that's reported can be explained.
Yeah.
But facts from what they've said, around 13% of it cannot." He's like, that's what I want to focus in on. Like, that's what NASA said too. Like they don't know, like this lower percent, they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Like what's that?
I think I don't know that it cannot or has not. You know what I mean? Like just because it has not been, for me, just because it has not been identified, does not mean that there is not enough for me to be like, time to throw out the physics book or whatever. I think because again, and I use this as an example just to give insight into my paradigm. in that, like, I grew up around people that spoke in tongues, right?
Yeah.
They believe that.
Yeah.
I don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they're lying, and again, I cannot speak to their experience, but it's not enough for me for somebody to be like, I saw something weird or I experienced something weird.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that's just how I view that stuff because of the environment I grew up in. So it's like, again, like it's for your experience or anybody's experience, you can't. I think it's textbook like unfalsifiable. Like I can't.
Right.
I can't tell you. You know what I mean?
Right,
yeah,
right,
I wasn't.
yeah.
I wasn't there. For me to change, and I'm not going to say these people are liars. But for me to change my opinion on it, you brought this up earlier. I think what I would need is, I need common scientific consensus. Mm-hmm. Like let's say alien bodies in Mexico, right?
Right.
We've got them, and they're like, and we're going to let everybody samples to the entire scientific community. We all just saw Oppenheimer, so we know that science thrives within cooperation and working together.
Yep.
And a bunch of scientists, and you're probably not going to get everybody on the same page, but the mass consensus is that this is not of this world, and that for me, that is what I would need, that data, and I would need people that understand and informed in that data to agree with each other.
Yeah.
That's the case. I am curious. What's the opposite of that? Is there something that would happen? You'd be like, oh, maybe it's not a thing.
I mean, I think the same.
Same. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think for me, Reilly, go ahead. You answer.
Well, I think, yeah. To your point, I think there are a number of science-based people, I think, that disprove it, or even in your talking points. And what I like about you, DJ, is like it feels like skeptics go immediately, no, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? When you're saying, hey, and you're like asking questions, and that's what I just really appreciate. But the idea that if somebody came out in the scientific community and went, much like a hearing, and said, all right, and not Neil deGrasse Tyson either. I'm talking, science-based, and said, this is what I believe. Yeah. That was a flying toaster.
Yeah.
That was catapulted into the atmosphere by, a random tornado, whatever it may be. And this is, I'd be more prone to believe that.
Yeah. But would that need to be the case for every single one of these?
Not every single one either.
No. For me,
because it's all different. It's all different experiences, different circumstances, especially.
For me, it's more full disclosure, right? Like it's like for me, if someone kept accusing me of something and saying something, and I had the facts to prove that they were lying, as you're asking, what would they have to show? Yeah. Okay, fine. Let me hear all the people that told Grush this stuff. Let me hear all that stuff. Okay, let me hear all of them. Where do they say I have this stuff? Okay, and with what they could do if they wanted to is they could say, oh, well, they've said this, and now everybody get it the hell out of there, and they can hide it if they wanted to. But instead, okay, don't tell me when you're going to come. Just invade, do whatever you have to do. Just find, show me all these things where everyone talks about these different reports that have been out there, right? And show me that they're all full of shit. Like they just haven't done in the same way where they haven't shown you the concrete evidence. They haven't shown me the concrete evidence that it doesn't, right? They haven't shown me
right.
They haven't
that's where I'm on.
That's where I'm saying it's like more or less like, okay, you have all these people who say this exists. I've seen this. I've seen that. And do I think that Bob Lazar is telling the truth? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know, but. Show me all the reports and let me talk to all these different people, all these military people that have come out that you won't let testify. Let them testify. Let them have the skiffs. When the government starts doing things like, oh no, they can't have the skiff, they can't have the committee, they can't do this, this person can't testify.
Why?
If you're like, this is silly, this is a waste of the resources. If you're like, what's his face, Chris Christie, go UFOs, and then when he realizes it hurts his numbers, and he's like, oh no, I would investigate it. Yeah. It's political shit like that the same way it drives you nuts drives me nuts, because it's like, the answer to your question is, prove those statements are the ones that are saying are wrong. It's where you're saying, prove to me they exist. Yeah. I'm saying, prove to me that they don't.
But this is so interesting too, because your point is coming out in your conversation, and there's a big part of it which is just the media. Because the thing that I sent to Kristian when they were reporting on the hearings on just the local Channel 7 news, they framed it with, "Did they discover aliens? Nope. No aliens. Then NASA said no, there was no aliens.
They
So
goof on it.
that's it.
Yeah.
And that was the entire report. You know what I mean? And it's
But that's not what the NASA report was. It was
and
way
that's
more
what
than that.
that's not what the NASA report was.
Right.
That's my point. You know, there's other things you could have added to that report, but to me, it just all fell into this like media advertising, you know, ratings. No, you know, it's like tune in because they lead it up. You know, next. Are there aliens? You know, then you get some fabric softener and something that's going to lower your cholesterol. And you know, the next movie, and then you go into it and like, nope, no aliens, and that's it. And it just feels like an incredible bias and an incredible way of just not taking it seriously when you can just highlight another part of that that says, but NASA does say that they don't know what that is, and there's going to be more investigation because it's not necessarily aliens. But that to me, it just feels like they're wasting a report. They're wasting talking to people and getting them invested.
Do you think this NASA thing is a step in the right direction? Do you perceive that as a step in transparency?
I do, because I mean, look, NASA, whatever you might feel, right? It's like NASA is like, it's like the legit organization. So when it's like the NASA, when you think of NASA exploring space, you think of NASA, right?
Yeah.
So if NASA, to me, when NASA says like because a lot of people inside of the, let's say the UAP community are like, oh no, they made a decision. They said, oh, it doesn't exist. They never said that.
Yeah.
What they said was, we have no evidence right now that this is alien craft or alien body. We're not saying that it isn't.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that is a huge step forward, because that's that means that the fact that they was a little shady, and I hope that all of us can agree on this at first. And I got the explanation afterwards, but they said, we're going to have somebody who's going to head our program. Now they're putting that's another step in the right direction, is they're going to have an actual UAP division, and so that's huge. I mean, that they're taking it serious. And all of our point earlier that we all believe it's something, we just want to see what it is, whether it's weather balloons, whether it's other countries, whatever. They're going to have people investigating. But what they did is, well, who's running it? Nah, we're not going to tell you. And it's like, why?
They didn't announce it? I thought they announced it.
They announced it after.
Oh, okay.
At first they didn't.
Okay.
And then it's like, well, but aren't you trying to, this whole thing's supposed to be about disclosure. It's about telling you why are you hiding. And now the excuse was, well, we didn't want his name out there because he was going to get harassed and this too. It's like, that's the gig, buddy.
Yeah.
That's the gig. Yeah. So, but that was the smaller thing. To answer your question, yes, I thought it was a major step forward, and I think it was also one of these things where people, you know, it's the conversation is getting louder. It's getting louder. Because you wouldn't have been talking about this a year ago, you know, even not to say that you probably would have been talking about it the same way, but you're talking about it. Yeah. And we took this show that we're doing here today. Even when I ran into you at a screening like 4 months ago, whatever it was, and we talked about it, and that was when I just kind of fell into the rabbit hole. I wasn't, before that conversation, did I ever have a conversation with you about UAP? No, because I was just, to me, it was something in my head just said, ask questions. Yeah. And where you say the same exact thing, but your brain goes to a different road, and I just go to the other road. Yeah. And it's one of these things that's why we're doing this show, is to say, let's ask those questions. You're saying the exact same thing. You're not saying don't ask questions, it's bullshit. Yeah. That's why I wanted you on the show, because I think it's very healthy and important to do the same thing you're doing, because eventually, hopefully, before we crap out on this earth, one of our points of view will hopefully come to the forefront, because there's so many questions being asked. Yeah. And whether it is that thing that you said to me, hey, look, they proved that this shit is just this, it's weather phenomenon, it's other country doing this. Will you shut the fuck up? The answer is if it's concrete proof. Yeah. In the same way that I'm sure that if they said, look, scientists said this is a freaking alien body, guys, you're going to go, hey, I'm going to get a text. Whoops. Yeah.
You know? Well, a lot has changed since 2009 when I saw my experience. My experience seeing the thing was met with complete, nope.
Yeah, right, Reilly.
Right, yeah. Right. How much were you drinking? Right. How much were you smoking? Right. Where were you? Right. Like all these different things, and that was just around friends and stuff. But the idea, even for me, was seeing it and being like, there's whatever that was. Yeah. But so you talking about it? You talking about? At least we're talking about. At least were you talking about this last year? No. Now it's changed a lot since 2019 when I finally went, Well, I can't really explain that. I believe that a lot more now.
Well, I do want to. We still have a lot to talk about. And we got the Mexico hearings to talk about.
I so want to talk about.
We will, and we also have the fact. Speaking of hearings, it looks like they're going to get a second hearing with Burchett and all of them. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we do, I also want to tell you guys both about us. If you've been watching this show, the UAP show, if you've been watching the big thing in general, you know how important our sponsors are. And we only take sponsors on that we really, really feel that you guys can benefit from. And two of those sponsors that I love are both Rumple and AG1. Here you go. I get to talk about Rumple again. You guys know I love talking about Rumple. Rumple was like Christmas for me the second they sent it. Why is Rumple so special? Well, they're on a mission to introduce the world to better blankets, and they've done it. They're made with a durable, sustainable material, and they're built to last. They have so many great things about them. They are built to endure the elements. The blankets are made with durable materials that repel spills, sand, stains, odor, no matter where you bring it. If it gets dirty, you throw it in the washing machine. The original puffy blanket is Rumple's #1 bestseller with over 1 million sold. I have one of these things, and I swear by it. With over 135 unique designs, there's a blanket for everyone. Now, Rumple blankets are not just for the outdoors. They're perfect for, you can watch a movie on the couch, kick back in bed, or bring with you to your local theater. I have a bunch of different ones. I have one that I take with me when I'm out to watch my daughter's soccer game, or if we're going to the park and having a picnic. But I also have one that I mentioned. I curled up on the couch, fell asleep with it because it's so comfortable. People are always fighting for these things in my house. I got to get more. Rumple also has a huge selection of indoor styles. They have the cozy hemp, they have the fleece, they have the Sherpa, all of it with responsibly sourced materials that they're made from. Super cozy, perfect. For my listeners, go to rumple.com/thebigthing and use code thebigthing at checkout and get 10% off your first order. Rumple.com/thebigthing. I promise you that this will be the one that you say, I'm so glad I finally listened to you. I got a Rumple blanket. And do it, do it, do it, do it. I can't go a day without talking about AG1, and I'm not just talking about you guys. I talk to all my friends about it. I talk to my family about it. I love AG1. I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I have this zoo cup that I've talked to you. I don't know where I got it from. The zoo, apparently. But I put AG1 in there, and I gave it a try a long time ago because Brett Sheridan wouldn't be quiet about it, and he was right. He was absolutely right. I drink it right away. I drink it right before my coffee, and I'm just ready to go. I just know that when I'm taking it, I'm like this, it feels good. I'm not a big vitamins guy where I'm taking 87 vitamins throughout the day. I take it all in one shot. I put it in the cup, and I'm feeling good. I sweep the floor, and then I take the AG1. My sleep quality is doing good because of AG1. Since I've been drinking it, I really have noticed an overall just kind of like a new pep in my step. And why do you want to take a bunch of different things where you can just take one scoop of powder, put it in water once a day? That's it. AG1 was designed with ease in mind so you can live healthier and better without having to complicate your routine. I mean, you guys know this. At this point, if you've been listening to my show, everybody knows that we have AG1 in the back of the. You can see it on camera. You can see it. I talk about it all the time. I get people commenting that they were signing up for it, and so many different people have been signing up, and I'm so excited that you are. It's delivered every month. It's been very easy to make it a daily habit. I get the travel packs, and I'm going to need those travel packs. I'm going on vacation soon. If you want to take ownership of your health, try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. But you have to go to drinkag1.com/bigthing. Drinkag1.com/bigthing. Check it out now. All right. Thank you once again to our friends over at Rumple, over at AG1. Look, man, get yourself a Rumple. Those blankets are fantastic. Have you done the AG1, the Athletic Greens or Rumple?
No.
DJ, the Athletic Greens. I'm not even kidding. I've been taking it every single day. I take it in the morning, but the Rumple blanket, I fell asleep on my couch last night. Just curled in. Where were you? I was with Rumple. But anyway, please, if you can, you have the means to do it. Please go sign up today. I always put our sponsors as the first pinned comment, and the links are always in the description. All right, guys, let's talk about this hearing. Because when the hearing came, I texted both you guys. When the hearing, it's something that I do now. When these stories come up, I text both of you because I like to get. And I hope you know how much I value your opinion on this stuff too. Because
it's great.
Yeah. Well, because it also lets me go. Because DJ will write stuff back, and sometimes I go, "Oh, it's DJ being DJ," and other times I go, "He's got a point." He's got a point. And I looked at it,
Damn it, he's right.
And that came to be inside of the Mexico hearings right away when I was texting back and forth with him, because it was tough to follow at first because there were not a lot of outlets that were giving the subtitles, and there were some that were, but it was all going well until the end of this thing. Now, some people, by the way, are going to be, and you have every right to do this, by the way. Some of you are still going to go, well, how was he able to do it if it's not legit? It is legit. It absolutely is legit. Those bodies were legit. Now, I'm in the DJ camp on this one. I don't think that those bodies were legit. Now, I should say, let me rephrase that. I don't think that they were extraterrestrial bodies. I don't think he made them up. I don't think they were cake, which is a hilarious meme, or video, whatever. I think that they were something that he found in Peru. He smuggled them out of Peru from what they were saying. Something from Peru.
Sure, Peru's stoked about that.
Right. Yeah. Whatever it might be. He's on some other, that's what's his name? Sorry, I got to pull his name up. But he was. Masons.
Yeah.
Now, they said about this guy he's not a shyster. He's not a guy who's making stuff up. He's a guy that is a showman who he's had these bodies, these types of bodies. These aren't the same bodies. People are like, oh, these bodies were proven to be fake before. They're not the same ones. Now, I'm not telling you they're not relatives of those ones, but they're probably
found in a cave over.
He's like, I had 8 of them. 6 of them were proven wrong in 2017. I brought the other 2 with me this time, hoping. But maybe.
Hope springs eternal.
Maybe. But nonetheless, he didn't tell, and they didn't tell anybody that they were doing this, by the way, too, at this hearing. Yeah. Ryan Graves, who was the pilot who has seen this, he has his own podcast and is very passionate, rightfully so, for the stuff that he's seen, and is very respected in the community, had this to say about the hearing itself. After the U.S. congressional UFO hearing, I accepted an invitation to testify before the Mexican Congress, hoping to keep up the momentum of government interest in pilot experiences with UAP. Unfortunately, yesterday's demonstration was a huge step backward for this issue. My testimony centered on sharing my experience and the UAP reports I hear from commercial and military aircrew through ASA's Witness program. I will continue to raise awareness of UAP as an urgent matter of aerospace safety, national security, and science, but I am deeply disappointed by this unsubstantiated stunt. Now, that would be, had the NASA stuff not come out like a couple days later, I think it would have been a much more of a major setback for the UAP community, right? Yeah. Because this shouldn't have happened, whether it's legit or not. And I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that I had talked about, everybody on the internet always talks about the UAP stuff. Like, The Hill will talk about it, News Nation will talk about it, various channels, even CBS and NBC, they'll put it out on YouTube because they'll get the hits. It's not covered like on the mainstream media as like the big story. And I said last week, I was like, how are they not covering this? The fact that alien bodies were presented at the Mexican government's hearing. And people are like, well, because it was nonsense. Even so, look at all of the nonsense that our politicians are doing every day, and it's the top story. It's the top story. If the Mexican government decided to bring out 2 cake bodies, no, it's not cake, but I'm just saying, shouldn't that be the top story? Of like, what are these guys doing over there? And if it's not, if it's real, what are they doing over there? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think it's, I think that's an example of like, just in general, the U.S. is not as interested, U.S. Citizens and media are not as interested in politics outside of our own particular spheres. So we're more interested in groping our boyfriend than this situation. It is.
Well, to be fair, she was being groped too.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with anybody.
There's a lot of groping going on.
Anybody being groped in general. I just, like if you're gonna call people groomers and stuff, just maybe don't do that. Public. Get your kids in it is all I'm saying. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's just general. Like, we're not as good about international news as we could be, as it would be, I think, beneficial in general. And I do think. It's just, for me, it's kind of when we talk about, these governments are doing these hearings, it's like, I think it's become increasingly clear, or at least at the time I've been alive, it's probably always been the case, but like, politics is theater, for the most part, as opposed to actually doing stuff. So it's like, because again,
This
like
was
these-
circus still.
Yeah,
man.
these these
Yeah.
hearings are happening. It's like again, show me the bodies. I think it's immediately suspicious that the bodies looked like
E.T.
E.T.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
A lot of jokes of the little alien and Men in Black,
Right.
X-Files, stuff like that. It's like, well, that's suspicious.
They blew their climax. You gotta wait on that. You gotta get the audience ready before you
Well,
just
and-
bring in your aliens.
Yeah, it's like and again, they said people had said, but yeah, you have to send it. I think you have to give samples to everybody if you believe it. And I think that's a part of the reason I remain skeptical. I think a lot of the times when people make claims, they'll yada yada over the details, and it's like, well, that's where you live or die. So you need to if you believe it, you need to let everybody have those samples and let them prove it.
Right.
You prove it. That's your opportunity. You know what I mean? Like you can't. It's not good enough. I think the assumption here. I don't know.
Do you think it set it back, or do you think because of the NASA thing it didn't, or it doesn't change anything for you anyway?
It doesn't change anything for me. I'm more interested in, do you guys think it set it back?
I didn't think it changed really anything because I think it's just we're used to this. The humans, we're rushing to. We always rush. It seems to like figure it out right away. And I feel like the alien for this Mexican hearing, the showman. You say he's a showman. It's like to try to rush to that finish line. He's just bringing it out because it's just in the air right now.
Because the
And
momentum is there, right?
the momentum
Right.
is there, so he throws out some aliens without really kind of considering it. When I just want to get everybody on the same page on there's something out there, we want to just discuss it. Because when you go, here it is, or not here it is, but it's like, what is that? Aliens.
Right.
That's when you're going to lose so many people. That's when you're going to.
Yeah. Well, so
Yeah,
I just
it's-
pictured, you guys see the last Indiana Jones movie?
Yeah.
You know when he's sitting, like when they transition from the younger Indiana Jones to like old Indiana Jones, he's sitting in the chair like out cold. I pictured this guy that way, and he's been waiting for like years for someone to call him, and they're just like, "Hey,
Yeah.
you still got those bodies?" He's like, "Yeah, I still got them." He's like, "Bring them."
Yeah.
Where? To the hearing. Really?
Yeah.
All right, I'll be there in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And like that's a possibility. Look, and it's also, I don't, not to discredit this guy too, because there's a lot of people who actually really think that he's got it, and the joke's going to be on us if it turns out that then they start doing the samples and it turns out these things are real.
Yeah,
But
great.
the other conspiracy theory around all of this, and again, I don't know, I don't necessarily believe this, but I've seen it thrown around, is that let's say that those powers that be of that sect of the government or the sect of the private thing that has been trying to cover this thing up was in cahoots with the Mexican government to go throw this off and have that guy throw this thing at the end and throw a monkey wrench, make this thing look as ridiculous as it could be.
That's where my deep dive into X Twitter went on the UFO Twitter was the CIA op of trying to throw some
Discredit it.
misinformation out there and throw the aliens out there. That'll get them, you know.
And that's why, I mean, because if you're Graves and you go, oh my God, what am I doing? Like I'm trying to like actually, I believe him in the same way that you said before, like in the things that he's seen and what he said at the hearing that I always thought was very fascinating was that they asked him, they said, how many reports out of the pilots that you've spoken to, how many of the reports do you think go unreported? He said 95%. 95%. And this is a guy who talks, and this is what he does. He talks to, right now he talks to them on his podcast, and he talks to people in general. He's there to expose the truth. So for him, it's got to be like just such a kick in the balls. But again, the next day he tweeted out about how it was a step forward with NASA. He was positive for the NASA thing. So it was the one, and the reason why I said it was going well beforehand is they showed other footage from the Mexican pilots. I don't know if you saw this particular thing, but they showed other UFO footage that it was like it wasn't stuff that's going to convince the DJ Wooldridge, but it's stuff it's pretty crazy with the triangles, but it's like they're all together, and it seems like they're in sync, almost like coordinated, more so than it. To me, it's very hard to say. Well, that's a weather thing. I'm not saying you're saying it, but like it's swamp gas or it's this or whether for that particular thing, it just looks too coordinated in the way that this is all set up and the way it looks. It's a light show. I'll believe that more so than I will anything else because it's like the way that this is the pilots didn't know what it was. They were scared out of their minds. And this was, again, military pilots. So all of that leading up to it, was, yes, a lot of the same old that we've heard before, but still, to me, way more credible than going, hey, there's these little alien things, because no one's going to believe it unless you say, first of all, if it looks like E.T., even if it's real, I'm going to go, this looks too much like E.T., guys. Yeah. Don't showcase this unless, I think it would have been more effective, as you said before, if they had like an actual scientist who looked at a piece of it. Yeah. A piece of it. Like, let's say its shoulder.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much.
Took the shoulder, right? Came in and said, well, what is this? And a renowned scientist, someone who the public goes, well, this guy is legit, and comes in and goes, we have analyzed this. This comes from, the muscle of it comes from something that we cannot explain as human. Right. Yeah. Then, if that is said, you'd go, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, because what he gave was, he said it's like 30% of it is unidentified. It's like 30%,
right?
I mean, wouldn't it be? I'm not an expert. I'm not a biologist or an anthropologist or any of those. But wouldn't it be all percent?
Right.
Wouldn't it be the whole?
Right. That's what I thought.
What's the implication there? Yeah. But yeah, and if they do all those tests and all that stuff, fantastic. That'd be amazing. But yeah, I think again for me, it's just be one of those like something that people can. Test and prove and come to a consensus on, like not just one person, not just two people, but the common
multiple
consensus. Yeah.
What do you think, Reilly?
In what?
No, as far as the like when it comes to these overall how this was presented, do you think that there's first of all, do you think there's any shot that you think this is put to rest, the alien bodies, these particular ones?
I mean, it made me immediately think of that. What was that Channel 11 Fox special? Or it's like, alien biopsy or alien autopsy. That was it. It reminded me of that.
Yeah.
It reminded me of just a circus. And, that stuff, the aliens bringing something out like that is hard for me to say, we're going to get that someday. Yeah. Like, we're going to have an alien. It's more believable to me that we have evidence of extraterrestrial something in this mineral pack.
Right.
Like, that's just a blob that we found.
Yeah.
That makes more sense to me than, a fully formed alien person being with that's opening on Hulu this weekend, right? Like the movie that they come down, they grab you, they stick probes up your and then they that is not going to be, I think, proven maybe ever.
The difficult thing when it comes to bodies, and again, this is getting me back to my skepticism on the we have them. Something we don't talk about a lot is, for example. Before we go, there actually is a few things that really excite me. One of them is the Europa Clipper, which is something NASA is working towards sending a probe to Europa, because for those that don't know, Europa is covered in ice, and they believe that there's water beneath it.
Yeah.
And they believe there's a good chance life, probably microbial life, but possibly more complex life. And when I say more complex life, I mean like fish type things.
Right.
Yes.
Live beneath that ice. And one of the things that they're concerned about, there's a lot of challenges to navigate, not the least of which is getting there, but getting through the ice. And the concern that if we get through there, odds are the space trip will kill any bacteria. But if one thing gets in, we could annihilate everything. Yeah. For example, when later Europeans came to what they call the New World, what we call the United States, they were like, oh man, it's so open, nobody's here. That's because the native indigenous population that was there had been decimated by diseases brought over by earlier European settlers.
Right.
And so when it talks to, like, we have a body, it's like, and there's no concern of bacteria or any of these
that's
things.
more the alien that's going to wipe us out.
This one kind of skips over that because it's supposedly 1,000 years old.
Right.
But
let's go to the Varginha case, right? Yeah. So are you familiar with that one at all?
No.
Okay, so the Varginha case is very fascinating. That's one that for you, the next time you come in, like you'll have so many questions, and I would love to talk to you about it because there's no way you believe a lot of it, but. To me, it's one of the most compelling cases. And it's the guy James Fox that was in that doc that has done it, and it's a case that happened in Brazil in a place called Varginha, pretty about the size of Colorado population, right? And so the reports are that there was a crashed craft, And this is the entire town that has that has seen many different witnesses that don't know each other and all these different things. But there's one guy who hadn't talked about it, and I think it happened in '96. I think it happened, and he hadn't talked about it since. He talked about it once, was told not to, and then James Fox got him to be able to speak, and he had this whole kind of recollection when he found where he found the actual craft, and he talks about it. But to bring up your point, the report inside of that, whether you believe it or not believe it, is that there were two cops. One of the cops that found, because there were these girls who had seen this alien, supposed creature that walked off afterwards, and these two cops saw them. The stories matched up as from both the girls and the cops of where they were in the same area and all that. And so the cop who I guess grabbed the alien, put it in the car, took it to the hospital. He grabbed it, got shit all over him. Was pretty healthy, died 2 days later.
Yeah.
They don't know, something like a mysterious illness, respiratory and all these other things.
Yeah.
Could it be explained? Probably, but let's say off of your point, if this is actually a thing, that would make sense. Like all these different things that however they found this particular body, like the biology of this thing.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? How is it gonna? How are we?
Because that would be the thing, is that we would not have evolved to interact with any of, you know, theoretically they've evolved immunity to it, so it doesn't matter to them. We haven't, so there'd be nothing to stop that.
Right.
Once it goes to the one guy, that's getting a huge chunk of the population.
It could be Corona all over again.
Yeah. and you can come up with reasons why it wouldn't. But again, I think it comes to the idea of like the same way you'd have to explain how they get there is you have to break the rules to get there. The rules as we understand them, you'd have to break the rules to get to the conclusion that wouldn't happen.
It's true. I mean, look, there's so many things that, like, there's a lot of fascinating cases. There's a lot of things that I think DJ is 100% correct of too, that just because they haven't been answered or haven't been explained doesn't mean they can't be. But there's a lot of smart people out there that are trying to get answers to it that can't for some of these things, right? And just, again, doesn't mean that there are answers. They just haven't found them yet.
Right.
Now, a lot of things we haven't found answers to, but a lot of things that some people thought was a step forward, was a major step forward, was the fact that this hearing did happen. And I think that we can all agree that whatever you think may or may not happen inside of that hearing and how much really you were convinced or not convinced, it definitely got the conversation. It became where it was less about people talking about, you started seeing people talking about it everywhere, because this was a hearing that you saw two AOC, and I always bring up, and what's his face? Gates on the same page, talking, you know, bipartisan, and people always bring, well, they're working on a program together, and say that's nothing. It doesn't mean, if it was any other subject, they could be going after each other real fast. Yeah. But everybody was this bipartisan thing, which I thought was fascinating in general. So Reilly and I had a conversation a couple of shows ago where I was convinced. I said, they're not going to do a second hearing. The government, they barely passed this one through. The first one they were going to have was going to be like in a closet somewhere, and then they were finally able to get it in one of the big rooms. They're not going to be able to do it. It's not going to happen. And I was wrong, because what they said is that they made a pitch to Kevin McCarthy to try to get a committee going. The committee was denied, and when I saw that, I was like, "Of course it was." But then, following, I think it was what's his face, Burchett, who tweeted out. He said, "However, we have been permitted a second hearing." And that's fascinating, and I was proven wrong on it. The question is, though, it has to be, and this is coming from someone who does believe in others. It can't be the same people. It can't be. It can't even be the same people with. Well, now I'm allowed to tell a couple other things now. Yeah. You've got to get people inside. This second hearing has to be something that is going after getting you on board.
Right, there you go.
It does. It can't be about getting me on board anymore, because I'm on board. Yeah. It's got to present something to where you can come on and go, and if you come on the show the following Tuesday after that hearing going, I don't know, we didn't really hear anything new. Yeah. Even if I think, well, wait a minute, because there will be stuff that I hear. They go, well, you didn't think this? Yeah. If this second thing doesn't hear you, it's a step back. Now, people are not going to agree with me. Yeah. But it's got to, because it's got to be people like you that start asking more questions, that you start to get convinced. Otherwise, we're just going to be in the freaking vicious circle that we're in.
Yeah. And no aliens. Please, at this hearing, no aliens.
Unless it's what DJ said.
No, I'm kidding. Unless
but you're right.
No.
But yeah, if it's something where they're like, look, that farce.
No.
This is the real thing, guys.
Yeah.
I don't think they should ever present it because that's the type of thing that it's gonna. But the one thing I will say is this: for that brief second where everyone went, "Whoa," because everybody did that. Whoa, what if this was real? What if it was
I
real?
did it.
Yeah.
I went.
Everybody did. Like, what if it was real at first, right?
Yeah.
He's like, "Whoa," it does go against the thing that everyone was talking. Well, the world wouldn't be able to handle it.
Yeah. That leads me to a question.
Well-
why when it comes to because I know in fiction why we present so if I'm writing a story like this, like let's say like Independence Day or Men in Black,
Sure.
Yeah.
I need it to be people don't know about it for my story to work.
Yeah.
In our world, what do you think the reason? Because I'm not entirely convinced that, when we talk about the government being shady, I don't mean in a conspiracy sense. I mean that for by and large, government functionaries are out for their own interests. And I'm not entirely convinced that every person involved in this would not see it in their best interest to let everybody know. Like, especially if you're talking the Cold War, I think it'd be a big feather in the US's cap to be like, we have aliens and Russia doesn't.
Right.
So what do you think the
benefit, the upside?
Well, the reason why they would keep it a secret?
So I do, as Reilly, I guess, has gone on the other side of this too. I do still believe very much so in the reverse engineering side of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you don't think in the alien craft anymore. You said you don't believe in the crash.
But I don't necessarily believe aliens, like bodies. I believe that there could have been a crash, but not many. What I'm trying to say is not a ton of them, that there's all these people out there that know all these different things.
Well, I do very much so. What I will say again too, on the record, I very much do believe Roswell was not a weather balloon. I think that was legit. I think that was the first one. I think that's where I don't think it was a coincidence around the same time all this stuff happened with Oppenheimer and the nuclear stuff and the nuclear energy and the reports around nuclear plants and all those different things. I think it's too much of a coincidence, personally.
Yeah.
Why they would keep it quiet is the same way they would try to keep quiet the nuclear bomb, right? The same way that they would want to keep quiet the space race. A lot of stuff they were doing for the space race. A lot of stuff they were doing out there because of what you just said. We want to beat the other places too, because if you believe the other reports that Russia does have some of these things and China has some of these things. And
Yeah. I always liken it to like Sputnik, and you see even said it. I mean, it becomes a race, an arms race, the space race.
And showing how the human race could potentially be like cattle or morons compared to other intelligent life. We don't know how the hell use these things.
Yeah.
And maybe there are ways that they have figured out to use it or not, and they don't want those secrets to be out. Because let's say hypothetically, it does come out, some whistleblower comes out in the next hearing that proves that the government has been holding back evidence, whether it's extraterrestrial life or other, the kind of blowback that would get from the world public, not just the American public, the world public, that would be the case would be astronomical. Don't you agree with that?
Because I have trouble believing they'd be able to do that. I got to put myself in the mindset
If
that they accomplished it.
Yeah, but if they
did,
hypothetically they did in the
then
second hearing and they said, oh, okay, look, and they admitted the fact that for the last 70 or 80 years they've been holding this from the world public. What do you think the blowback of the world would be in a situation like that?
I don't.
God.
I don't know, because in this scenario you're also saying Russia and China have them as well.
Potentially. Let's say they didn't. For this scenario, it's just the United States.
It would be pretty big. It'd be pretty big. It is tough for me to outrace because again, the scale of it takes me back to I just don't think they could accomplish a cover up that large for that long.
But if they did, but wouldn't you say that if that was the case and it was a major thing that would be a blowback? Wouldn't you say, well, no, that's probably why they kept it quiet for so long, because they were trying to hold it, and now with phones, now with technology, now with everybody talking, there's only so long you can hold it quiet.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a place that I go to that the main reason there might be not more information is because we're not ready. It could be as simple as either they don't understand the data in front of them, or there's stuff that is maybe a potential threat that it's look, if we say this, that will cause a panic that we don't want to create.
You say that, and I understand that, but I think panic actually tends to either does or politicians believe it benefits them a lot. We have an entire party that is fueled based off of creating panic around stuff. which is not to say the other party doesn't do that stuff. It's just,
no, I think that's inherent to politics.
Yeah.
Every news station does.
Yeah.
No, they rely.
Local news does that.
Especially fast panic, because
Yes.
slow panic, like climate change, they're like, well, those numbers don't do well, so let's not talk about that. But like, if there's somebody out there that can create fast panic that we could possibly throw bombs at, that's a good excuse to keep making bombs.
But the panic though, if they don't know what it is, and it's just like Independence Day, it's just like panic, everybody, great, we're gonna nuke them.
Well, that
didn't work.
That's why again, if you want to go to the extreme kind of tinfoil hat people, like you look like a Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer says that we're not too far away from the government. To go exactly to your point, we're not too far away from the government staging an alien invasion because of that very reason of showing that fear, because there's only so much that they can hide. So whatever they have been able to do,
wag the dog too.
That's more or less like it's too far to being exposed. Take one of these things out, bomb something, and then we'll say whatever it might be. Now that's complete. Conspiracy theory.
I want to see that movie. Though.
Right. But I'm just saying that's the kind of thing that you could see, like, to where it'd be like, oh, there it is. So that's how we get them to hey, look, we didn't think you guys were going to be ready for it yet, or I guess you were right, but like they're attacking now. But it's like it's again tinfoil theory.
So do you think for this scenario, the way alien technology impact our own technology, specifically in nuclear science?
Do I think that it has impacted it?
Yeah.
No, I think they're attracted to it. I think that there's a. I mean, my personal thought is I think that whatever these things are, it's just
they happen around all nuclear areas, and even like concentrated areas, like in Japan, where Nagasaki and Hiroshima
it's just
happened.
Too coincidental.
It just seems weird
that all these, and whether it's the Russian reports, Japanese reports, Chinese reports, I think there are tons of different countries. And tons in the United States, that a lot of these sightings have been around nuclear facilities. Now, I don't know why, and even they asked it at the hearing. The same they asked at the hearing, like, do you think these things should be interested in our nuclear? And they didn't have an answer, but they're like, it seems like that could particularly be possible from all the different sightings. And then there's a report in the 60s that I've talked about that they cover in that. I think they cover it in that.
Oh yeah,
in the one where
it was the only one that that I couldn't find an immediate like. Well, here's what happened. But I think part of that is due to the fact that they it was 6 years, right? It was 2020 around that time.
Yeah, it was 1963 or something.
Yeah, so that's a lot of time for these guys to only be communicating with each other, and perhaps it's just not a great example of because of the time lapse of like these guys are saying that happened, but there's no way to confirm, deny.
Well, they have reports that all like 10 of the missiles shut down. And like,
I think there's some legitimacy there. The way I recall the story is they saw, I want to say, red weird lights in the sky, and then they had a problem with the shutdown with the silos, and then the government was like, "Don't talk about this." But the government would say that it's in the middle of the Cold War. The government would say that if the silos just shut down.
100%.
And so it's. I'm just saying it's an opportunity that that with that amount of time, that it's easy to conflate. Memories shift, memories change. Like for example, where my wife and I live, like it can be really hard to get to our place when people park in front of their garages.
Yeah.
And one day it was just like we couldn't even get to our garage because the way people were parked. And over the years, we've been there for years, and we're like, we know in our HOA agreement, we know it says in there, you are not allowed to park in front of your garage. And we didn't want to be jerks, so we were going to bring it up, but it's become increasingly challenging. Yeah. And I brought up the paperwork, and it's not there. No. And so at one point, one of us must have assumed, like, it's got to be in there, right? And so that planted the seed, and then we talked about it, and then became a thing over time.
I think
such a human thing.
I think absolutely reports can change, and look at that, like the Zimbabwe case. If I'm familiar with that one, with the kids and stuff that I've seen. Now, over the course of years, your reports can change, but I think there's a significant difference that all three of us, even if it was 30 years, wouldn't forget 10 missiles shutting down. Right now,
I'm not saying the missiles didn't shut down. I just, maybe the lights happened on a different day. Maybe that over the conversations, the two things got conflated.
But even so, 10. They said it inside of the report that one shutting down, even in 1960, whatever, 2, 3, whatever it was rare or hardly likely. 10 is unheard of, and it's never happened since
That we know of.
That we know of.
Yeah.
That we know of. And there was also the report of that. Not only was the lights, there were other people there that saw a disc. That there were not all of them that were in there, but there were a few of them who did see the disc and reported it afterwards too. And then those lights came in. It was essentially like the red lights that they saw was like scanning something. Then the thing shut down. Then went back up after the lights appeared.
Yeah.
So that's the one, as like you said, like could be explained.
Yeah.
But hasn't been all the way through. And even like you just said, like that was the only one out of that whole thing. You were like, I don't necessarily know what that was.
Yeah. Yeah, 6 years is just 6 years is a long time.
It is,
and so, and again, there are a lot of stories of not UFO related, but just close calls with our nuclear arsenal and stuff like that. To the point, like maybe we shouldn't have it. But anyway, maybe it's a mistake. That's all I'm saying. And that's another thing too. Is I think we like to think. Human memory is not necessarily infallible, but reliable. Is more reliable than that appears to be based on studies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, but the other thing too, but those are all documented like the day after it happened. So a lot of the reports that also came in, now not interviews themselves, the interviews years later, they can lose things and memory could change, but if you're looking at a report that happened the day later, the memory's not going to change that much more from what the reports are saying.
Insignificant is that.
Right.
You know, that stuff for me, when I'm with you on this, it's just like if 10 go off.
10.
And it's just like, and it's this life or death situation coupled with so many things. I mean, that sticks with you.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, but it also, heightened situations like that can impact your memory more. Like, for example, if a bank is robbed, they have to make sure all the tellers that were involved are separated so they're not talking, because then their stories can seed into each other.
100%.
And
Great.
Yeah. It's a great point. I mean, it is. It's trauma situation at that point. Like you're dealing with nuclear weapons, and you could be. But the other counter to a lot of people would say to that too is that, I mean, and I'm going to counter the counter as I say it. The answer is going to be, well, they're also human beings. But the question is going to be like, when you have people that are working with nuclear weapons, they're given psych tests, they're given all these different things, and this is not what you're saying at all. You're not saying that it's not true what they're saying. You're not calling them crazy.
Yeah, I'm not calling anybody crazy, saying anybody's a liar.
But there are people who say, well, why would they make this stuff up? They must be out of their minds. Well, then the people who hired them should be fired. Yeah. Because, and this is one circumstance. There's tons. You look at there was another report that happened in Japan, I guess I don't know how many years ago it was, but there was one that came out recently, and it was around where all the energy was from the Nagasaki stuff. Hiroshima. Yeah. So it's to me, it's interesting.
Where there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing.
Yeah. And it doesn't,
it just seems so prevalent.
But it also goes back to DJ's point too. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's otherworldly things that are investigating these things. It could be anything that are investigating these. I just think there's something about how many sites have been around nuclear. I mean, if it's like whatever you think about Aaron Rodgers. Did you see the thing Aaron Rodgers talked about the UFO sighting that he had?
I heard about it. I don't know that I remember what he said.
He talked. It was where he was. I think there was the same thing. It was not too far away from like a nuclear facility where him and like 3 other people had seen it and the same type of thing, and then they saw the aircraft flying after it right afterwards too. So it's like.
And that feels more science-based. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like there's an attraction there, or why is that? Like there's more data that maybe could be like drawn together where you go, this is not necessarily coincidental anymore because of these factions therein. So that's where I kind of just, my skepticism kind of melts away a little bit, and I clue in and go, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And why is that? I mean, I'm so based in science being the reason for all of this, that it's not aliens. We keep saying this, but like aliens and craft, no. But what about the possibility that there's physics involved in what E = MC squared, and that you get to wormholes, black holes, and this, and I know where do we go with this science? That's what I want to know, because I believe we will get there sooner or later, closer to not the answer, but closer to okay.
No, got this something. And maybe the second hearing will do it. Maybe it won't. Who knows? But we had talked about a lot here today, guys. We talked about a lot. We talked about
Before we go, can I say a few things that do excite me?
Of course you can.
Okay, so I mentioned Europa Clipper. I think it's really exciting stuff, because I think
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
I think the way we discover alien life is going to be super boring. It's going to be we sent a thing to Europa and we found some germs, and that's super cool.
Technically an alien, it's
exactly.
right?
There's also a project called Breakthrough Listen, which is a coordination of satellites trying to pick up signals from space, because we should be hearing these people talking to each other. Obviously, it's a little bit challenging because they're aliens, so they're not necessarily communicating the same way we would. But they've started to incorporate AI to try, and it's also challenging to get the background noise of all the stuff we're putting out there. It'd be if I understand, it'd be better if we had something out in space listening to it. But the logistics of it's better to have it on the ground. But the progress made on something like Breakthrough Listen, because again, I just think it's going to be boring. Like we pick up a signal. There's something called, I believe it's called the WOW signal, that they have not been able to repeat. But it has the earmarks of something that could be not a naturally occurring signal from space. The other one that I think is really interesting is I think it's called Breakthrough Starshot, which is I'd have to look at my notes, but I think the closest Earth-like star with an Earth-like planet around it is Alpha Centauri, which is about 4 light years away.
Yeah.
They're looking at ways to create small light solar cells that they can send out that way, based on the lightness of the craft and the size of the craft. They're looking at trying to get it up to, I think it's like a 16th the speed of light. And so it would take about 20 to 30 years to get there. And it's a lot of cool stuff. And then they have to figure out how they're going to get the information back to us from that thing, which involves possibly sending out a bunch and then daisy chaining the signal. That I think that's really exciting too. And that's stuff that could occur within our lifetimes. The issue with Project Starshot is obviously we're not talking about breaking the speed of light or any of that stuff. Even that, something on that scale, relatively grounded comparatively, we do not have the technology to accomplish yet. Yeah. We're still working towards that.
Or do we?
And then there's other logistical issues about like craft that small, you wouldn't have to worry about hitting something big, but like small, you're going so fast, small particles like dust, you'd hit enough of that it could damage the craft. And again, so it's once you get into all the logistics of that stuff, it's harder for me to buy into some of the UAP stuff, but this stuff I think I find really fascinating. I find really interesting. I recommend people look into it, and the effort and energy people are and manpower are putting towards this stuff, I think is really exciting.
I see if we're going to Saturn and checking for alien life or extraterrestrial life, whether it's microorganisms or whatever. I mean. And then sending probes out there to Alpha Centauri to get readings and everything. I mean, that to me is aligned to these UAPs.
No.
If we're doing this, we're sooner or later we could answer this. No. I believe that in my bones.
Oh, look, there's a lot of people out there that are really locked into this community. People, like I said, I brought up James Fox a bunch of times on the show so far, but like he's convinced that in the next year we're going to get a lot more information that is hard for the government to back. Ross Coulthard says the same thing. You've got there's tons of people out there who are talking about these, that it's going to happen. There's the one guy.
I was going to say
the one CIA agent who says that aliens are coming in 2027. But like for the most part, I think that there is a lot. It is. I was wrong. I thought that the conversation around this would just die down. I thought the conversation would be like, okay, we had our hearing. That's it. No one's talking about it anymore. And I was wrong. I mean, there's this stuff with NASA that just happened. There are internet outlets that are covering it, and not just like channels like ours. I mean, like news outlets. So I think that the conversation will be out there, and I think there will be things that we hear more of. And I think the stuff you're talking about is very fascinating, based in kind of in science at the moment too. I would love to, not now because it'll be another 45 minutes, but like what your thoughts are on like the simulation theory and things of that nature. We've talked about that, like, which is
I have opinions.
I would love to hear it because until about 2-3 weeks ago, I'll be naive. I just thought it was a Matrix thing. I didn't even realize it was like a legit thing until I heard like actually I couldn't believe how many scientists like actually believe it and actually think like it's like way more believe in that that simulation theory could be then more so than that there are not even necessarily aliens, that there are UAPs even in the sky. More so believe in the simulation theory, which is fascinating to me. I mean, that to me just seems like a video game, but it's a conversation for another time. DJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was great.
The exact reason I had you on here, to have that kind of conversation, and thank you for showing people that you can have a conversation about this not. No, I don't think anybody's opinion was changed, and nor should it have been.
Yeah.
It was just like, here's my point of view. I wish that more people could talk about this, like, in politics in general. You
Yeah.
know, like, and just be able to. And I think it's also the problem with the internet. I think the internet is like, who knows? If we didn't know each other and we started tweeting back and forth at each other.
Yeah, it
not
get
the-
heated real quick. Yeah.
It's not the same conversation.
You
But
can't get the cadence in the voice. You can't get the understanding behind it, the human
aspect
interaction.
of it. And it's like, because we've both, because DJ and I have both been talking about this, like, just kind of, you got to come on the show, you got to talk about, we got to have the conversation, because when I first brought it up to DJ, like, and anything else, and I've told him this too, he had that thing that most people do. It's like the, and then more looking into it, he's like, okay, he said it here today. I believe that these people believe in what they're saying. I believe in it too. I just think that there's answers behind it, and I'm not calling anybody liars. I'm not saying this too. And I think that DJ actually shifted the stigma away from a lot of that today too, to be honest with you, because I think that if you can have that kind of conversation with somebody, and this is why I got so heated with Brett the other day, because it wasn't this kind of conversation.
No.
It wasn't a fact of like, okay. And I did not explain myself well enough on that show either too, because but
I had to watch this show.
but yeah, but it was, we started laughing about it 5 minutes later. But it was one of these things where it was just like, you've seen it, you have your reasons, you have your understanding behind it, I have mine. I thought it was a very pleasant conversation. I thank you for doing it. Will you tell the audience where they can find you?
Yeah, you can check me out at Only Stupid Answers, same as this show, anywhere podcasts are listened to. Check it out.
Marcus Rodius Reillyus.
Yeah, at Reilly around on the internet. You can find me there. Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining me once again. Please, if you have the means to do it and you want to help out this show and you want to support the show, and if you can support this show, please check out one of our wonderful sponsors here today. I have pinned all of them on the first comment on the comment section. You can also go in the description to find them. If you haven't already done it, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and please, we're at 93,000 subscribers right now. We can get to 100, but we need you guys. Show a little. Hit that button. For DJ, Mark Reilly, and me, that's the show. We'll see you next time.